In 1959, deep in the frozen Ural Mountains of Russia, a search team stumbled upon something that would spark one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. 9 experienced hikers from the Dyatlov expedition had vanished during a brutal winter storm, but no one was prepared for what the rescuers found. Their tent was discovered first, slashed open from the inside as if the hikers had fled in panic. Snow had buried the camp, but the footprints were unmistakable, bare feet and socks leading into the blizzard, away from shelter, and toward death. When the search team followed the tracks into the forest, they found the first 2 bodies lying beside the remains of a small fire. They were shoeless, stripped down to their underwear, as if the freezing cold had driven them into a deadly delirium. The branches above them were broken, evidence of desperate attempts to climb a tree, maybe to escape something or someone. Further up the mountain, they found another 3 bodies, scattered as if the hikers had been running for their lives, collapsing one by one in the snow. No signs of struggle, no signs of an attacker, just frozen faces twisted in terror. But the most disturbing discovery came 2 months later when the remaining 4 hikers were found buried deep beneath the snow in a ravine. Their injuries were impossible to ignore or explain. One had a crushed ribcage with force comparable to a speeding car crash. Another had her tongue ripped out, her eyes missing. And yet there were no external wounds, no bruising, no cuts, as if the trauma came from pure pressure, not violence. The official investigation ended with a single chilling phrase: a compelling natural force. No one knew what that force was. No one knows even today. Theories have blamed everything: secret Soviet weapons, avalanches, infrasound, Yeti attacks, indigenous Mansi hunters, and even extraterrestrials. But none of them fully explain the torn tent, the radiation traces on their clothing, the internal injuries without external damage, or the fact that the hikers fled into a storm wearing almost nothing. More than 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains a frozen riddle, a mystery sealed in snow, fear, and 9 young lives lost to something the world still struggles to understand. On the night of April 26, 1986, a few minutes after the explosion that tore Reactor 4 apart, the first firefighters arrived at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. None of them were told what they were walking into. No warnings, no protective suits, no radiation masks, just a call about a simple roof fire. But the photographs taken that night tell a very different story, one of unimaginable heroism in the face of an invisible death. As the firefighters climbed onto the roof of Reactor 3, they faced a nightmare glowing in the darkness below them. The core of Reactor 4 had completely exploded, exposing a blinding blue light, Cherenkov radiation, and shooting deadly particles straight into the sky. The men didn't know it, but they were standing only meters away from the most radioactive spot on Earth. The images show them with their hoses, silhouettes against the burning graphite flames, casually kicking aside chunks of debris. But those chunks were not normal debris. They were fragments of the reactor's nuclear fuel, so radioactive that a single touch meant certain death. For many of the men on that roof, their exposure lasted just 40 to 60 seconds. That's all it took. Their bodies absorbed amounts of radiation equal to thousands of X-rays. They could feel it almost instantly, a metallic taste in the mouth, a wave of nausea, a burning sensation on the skin, the first signs of acute radiation poisoning. Yet not one of them left their post. They fought the fire anyway. Captain Volodymyr Prebek, Senior Sergeant Vasily Ignatenko, Lieutenant Viktor Kibanuk, These men and their crews continued to spray water onto a reactor that was no longer there, because no one had told them the truth. The Soviet system demanded silence, even when silence killed. By sunrise, most of the fires were out. The roof was no longer glowing. Chernobyl would not turn into a second explosion. The firefighters had saved millions of lives, while losing their own. The photographs taken that night captured the final hours of these men. Exhausted faces illuminated by the burning plant, hands resting on hoses, unaware that their fate had already been sealed. Within days, their skin began to blister, their organs began to fail, and within a few weeks, nearly all of them were dead. They say heroes run toward danger, but these men ran toward something much worse, a danger they couldn't see, couldn't smell, couldn't fight, and could never survive. To this day, the photos of the Chernobyl firefighters stand as haunting reminders of a moment when ordinary men faced an invisible monster and paid the ultimate price.
August 6, 1945, 8:15 in the morning. A normal summer day in Hiroshima. People were walking to work, opening shops, sweeping doorsteps. Nobody knew that above them, 600 meters in the sky, the world's first deployed atomic bomb was silently falling. And then the sky exploded. In a flash brighter than the sun, temperatures soared to over 4,000 degrees Celsius. The blast vaporized everything within seconds: buildings, stone, metal, and human beings. But out of this unimaginable destruction came one of history's most chilling photographs: the Hiroshima shadows. On the steps of a bank, investigators found a pale outline burned into the stone, the perfect silhouette of a person sitting peacefully moments before the explosion. The body had blocked the intense heat, protecting the stone behind it. When the person was instantly vaporized, the area they shielded remained darker, leaving behind a human-shaped shadow that would outlive them. This wasn't paint. It wasn't soot. It was the absence of annihilation. Other shadows were found across the blast zone, on bridges, on walls, on the sidewalks of the city. Silhouettes of people walking to work, holding umbrellas, carrying buckets, frozen in the exact position they were in when the bomb detonated. No faces, no bodies, just marks. The most haunting part? Each shadow represents a person who was so close to ground zero that their life ended in an instant, too fast to leave anything behind except their shape. The heat from the bomb bleached exposed surfaces, but wherever a living body stood, it created a protective barrier. For a fraction of a second, that person shielded the stone from the flash, and then they were gone. Nothing remained, no skin, no bones, no ash, only the shadow. Scientists later measured the stone and found chemical changes caused by the bomb's thermal radiation. The shadows weren't just scorched, they were carved into the material at the molecular level, a permanent scar of human presence. One moment, someone was sitting peacefully on the bank steps. The next moment, their entire existence was erased, but their outline was burned into history. Hiroshima's shadows are more than images. They are ghosts etched into the earth, reminders of the instant when human life became light, and then nothing at all. They stand today as silent witnesses, not to death alone, but to the unimaginable power that humanity unlocked, and the warning carved into stone by those who never even saw the flash coming.
In the year 79 AD, the Roman city of Pompeii was alive with noise, markets buzzing, children playing, merchants shouting their prices across busy streets. Nobody had the slightest idea that the mountain towering above them, Mount Vesuvius, was not a mountain at all, but a sleeping monster. And on August 24th, that monster woke up. The first eruption sent a massive column of ash and pumice miles into the sky. People fled, choking as the air thickened with falling stone. But this was only the beginning. What came next was far worse. At around 6 a.m., a pyroclastic surge, a superheated wave of gas, ash, and volcanic particles burst from the volcano and slammed into Pompeii. This cloud raced downhill at over 300 kilometers per hour, hotter than 500 degrees Celsius, enough to kill instantly. And in that instant, the people of Pompeii were frozen forever. When archaeologists began uncovering the city nearly 1,700 years later, they discovered strange hollows in the hardened ash. These empty spaces were the final shapes of Pompeii's victims, their bodies long decayed, but their last moments preserved. Scientists filled the hollows with plaster, revealing some of the most haunting images in archaeology. A man lying on his side, hands pulled to his face in reflexive terror. A mother shielding her child with her arms. A family huddled together, their bodies curled as the heat stole their breath. A dog twisted in its last attempt to escape its chain. These are not statues. These are casts of real people, captured in the final seconds of their lives. The details are staggering: folds of clothing, strands of hair, even the contorted expressions of pain and fear. The volcanic surge didn't burn them alive. It didn't crush them. It simply overwhelmed them with heat so fast that their muscles contracted, locking their bodies into a pose of instant death. For centuries, these victims lay beneath meters of ash, perfectly preserved time capsules of a disaster no one could outrun. And every plaster cast is a window into a moment that should have disappeared forever. A frozen scream, a final breath, a desperate attempt to survive the unstoppable force of nature. The victims of Pompeii are more than archaeological discoveries. They are reminders of how fragile human life is and how quickly an ordinary day can become the last. Their silence tells a story louder than any words. A whole city erased in hours, and its people locked forever in the ash of a volcano that still watches over them today. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the world changed in a single, unimaginable moment. Two passenger jets struck the twin towers of the World Trade Center, igniting massive fires and trapping thousands of people above the impact zones. What happened inside those upper floors is something the world never fully saw, except in one photograph. At 9:41 a.m., Associated Press photographer Richard Drew captured a single image, a man falling headfirst from the North Tower. A snapshot so quiet, so still, so painfully calm that it became one of the most haunting photographs in modern history. They call him the Falling Man. The photograph freezes him mid-air, body perfectly vertical, one leg bent, arms by his sides. There is no blur, no panic, no chaos, just a man suspended between life and death, framed by the colossal steel lines of the tower behind him. What makes the image so terrifying is not what it shows, but what it forces us to confront. Inside the North Tower, temperatures had risen past 1,000 degrees Celsius. Smoke choked every stairwell. windows shattered from the heat. For those trapped above the flames, there were no exits, no rescuers, no hope of escape. The falling man did not slip. He did not trip. He made a choice no human should ever have to make. And that's the truth that made this picture almost too painful for the world to face. For years, newspapers avoided printing it. TV stations refused to show it. Even families feared recognizing a loved one. Thousands of people fell that morning, but the world rarely speaks of them because the reality is unbearable. They were victims making their final act of autonomy in the moment of unimaginable horror. The identity of the falling man has been debated for decades. Some believe he was a man named Jonathan Briley, a sound technician who worked in the tower's restaurant. Others insist the truth may never be known. And maybe that's why the photograph is so powerful, because he could be anyone – a father, a brother, a friend, a face in the crowd whose final moment was captured not in agony, but in a strange, heartbreaking stillness. The falling man is not just a photograph. It is a symbol of the silent tragedies within the larger tragedy, lives caught in a moment so extreme that their final choice became a message to history, a message that says, "Remember me. Remember all of us. Remember what was lost." The image of the falling man is a reminder of human vulnerability, human courage, and a day the world will never forget.
At 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906, San Francisco was still half asleep. Horses clopped along early morning streets, milk wagons rattled over cobblestones, and families were waking to another ordinary day. And then the earth split open. A violent jolt tore through the city, so strong that people were thrown from their beds, windows shattered instantly, and buildings groaned like living creatures. The shaking didn't stop, it intensified. For 45 horrifying seconds, the ground convulsed with a force so powerful it was felt from Oregon to Los Angeles. And by the time it stopped, San Francisco was dying. The photographs taken after the quake show a city that looked like it had been hit by a bomb. Entire blocks collapsed into piles of splintered timber and brick dust. Streets buckled into jagged waves. Gas lines burst beneath the rubble, igniting fires that would burn for 3 straight days. What the earthquake didn't destroy, the flames finished. Images of the ruins showed towering walls snapped like matchsticks, mansions reduced to skeletal frames, and steel rails twisted by the unimaginable heat. People wandered in shock through streets filled with smoke, carrying scraps of their lives, portraits, blankets, the remains of their homes. Some had no homes left at all. Over 250,000 residents, more than half the city, were suddenly homeless. The worst part? The firestorms were impossible to stop. Water mains shattered during the quake, leaving firefighters with empty hoses, forced to watch helplessly as entire neighborhoods burned. In desperation, they used dynamite to create fire breaks, blowing up buildings to stop the spread. It barely worked. The sky turned black. Ash rained down like snow. Flames reflected off the bay, turning the water the color of blood. One of the most haunting photographs shows the ferry building clock tower, still standing proudly, while the city behind it has collapsed into smoldering dust. Another shows City Hall, once a symbol of power, now lying in ruins like a fallen giant. By the end, over 80% of San Francisco had been reduced to debris. Modern scientists estimate the earthquake measured 7.8 on the Richter scale, but survivors said it felt like the end of the world. Yet in the ruins, there were moments of astonishing resilience. Bread lines formed. Makeshift kitchens appeared on sidewalks. Families slept in parks under tents sewn from bedsheets. The city refused to die. But the photographs remain, silent witnesses to a catastrophe that turned a thriving metropolis into a wasteland in less than a minute. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake was not just a natural disaster. It was a moment when the ground itself betrayed humanity, and the images of its ruins still show a city fighting to rise from the ashes of its own destruction.
January 27th, 1945. A cold, silent winter morning in southern Poland. Soviet soldiers from the 322nd Rifle Division pushed through the snow-covered gates of a place they had only heard rumors about, a place called Auschwitz. What they found there would haunt the world forever. The photographs taken that day show survivors standing behind barbed wire, staring blankly at the soldiers who had come to free them. Their faces are gaunt, hollow, barely human. Their bodies reduced to skin stretched over bone. Many wore striped uniforms that hung from their frame like rags. Some were too weak to stand. Others had to be carried out on stretchers made from doors or blankets. These were the people who lived through humanity's darkest invention, the industrialized killing machine of the Nazi regime. When the gates opened, around 7,000 prisoners were still alive inside the camp, some children, many sick, all traumatized. Many had no idea what liberation meant. They had survived starvation, disease, torture, forced labor, endless roll calls in freezing temperatures, and the ever-present threat of the gas chambers. One of the most iconic liberation photographs shows a group of children holding up the sleeves of their uniforms, revealing the tattooed numbers on their arms. They look directly into the camera, not with joy, not yet with hope, but with the lifeless stare of those who have seen too much and lost too many. Another photograph captures survivors gathered around makeshift fires, trying to warm their trembling bodies. Some smile faintly, unsure if they are allowed to. Others look away, unable to believe it's over. What the soldiers saw went beyond anything they expected. Storage rooms filled with human hair, mountains of shoes, piles of suitcases still marked with names, the belongings of over 1.1 million people who never walked back out of the camp. The survivors were living proof of what remained. Doctors described their condition as beyond medical understanding. Many were so malnourished that even drinking water too quickly could kill them. Some were mentally broken, unable to comprehend that the guards were gone, that the beatings had stopped, that they were no longer waiting for their own execution. And yet, amid the horror, there was something else. A spark. You can see it in the photographs if you look closely. The moment a prisoner realizes they are free. A faint lift of the chin, a widening of the eyes, a trembling, almost unbelieving smile. These images became some of the most important photographs in human history, not just because they captured suffering, but because they captured survival. They bear witness to the people who endured the unimaginable and lived long enough to step out of the gates that millions never escaped. Auschwitz at liberation is more than a historical event. It is a warning carved into time, a reminder of how far humanity can fall, and how strong the human spirit can be, even in the darkest hell ever created. November 22nd, 1963. Dallas, Texas. A warm, sunny Friday afternoon that should have been nothing more than a routine political visit. Instead, it became the final chapter of a presidency and one of the most analyzed moments in American history. The photographs taken just minutes before the assassination show President John F. Kennedy riding through downtown Dallas in an open-top Lincoln Continental limousine. He's smiling, relaxed, waving to the cheering crowds that line the streets. Jacqueline Kennedy sits beside him, elegant in her pink suit and matching pillbox hat, unaware that her life is about to shatter in seconds. Around them, the atmosphere is electric. Thousands of people line the sidewalks, hanging from windows, climbing onto steps and ledges just to catch a glimpse of the young, charismatic president. Police motorcycles flank the limousine. Secret Service agents walk nearby, though not on the car itself, something that would become an endless point of debate later. The motorcade turns onto Houston Street. The crowds are still thick, waving flags, taking photographs. Nobody sees the danger hidden ahead. As the limo makes the slow turn onto Elm Street, it enters Dealey Plaza, a quiet stretch of road bordered by grass, road signs, and a red brick building, the Texas School Book Depository. In the photos, Kennedy is still smiling, still waving, completely unaware that a rifle is being aimed at him from a sixth-floor window high above. The sight is eerie in retrospect. Kennedy's hand mid-wave, frozen in photographs taken seconds before fate strikes. Jacqueline's smile, Governor John Connally turning in his seat to talk to the president, sunlight glinting off the polished chrome of the limousine. Everything looks normal, peaceful, almost cinematic. But behind one of those open windows is Lee Harvey Oswald, hidden in the shadows, rifle rested on a stack of boxes. The world has studied these photographs endlessly, zooming in, analyzing angles, searching for anything that might reveal what no one knew was coming. And then, just moments after the cameras clicked, the world changed. 3 shots rang out. Crowds screamed. Secret Service agents sprinted toward the limousine, and history was rewritten in an instant. But the photographs from moments before the assassination remain some of the most chilling images ever taken, not because they show violence, but because they capture the last peaceful moments of a living president, a man smiling into a crowd that loved him, unaware that he had only seconds left to live. These images are a snapshot of innocence right before tragedy, a bright American afternoon frozen forever at the edge of the darkest moment of the decade.
January 28, 1986. Cape Canaveral, Florida. A cold morning, the coldest launch day NASA had ever attempted. And yet, the photographs taken that morning show nothing but excitement, pride, and absolute confidence. The Challenger crew of 7 walked out of the operations and checkout building wearing bright orange flight suits, smiling and waving as they headed toward the Astrovan that would take them to Launch Pad 39B. These are the last images of them alive, and they are unexpectedly joyful. There's Commander Francis Dick Scobie, calm and collected, giving a thumbs up. Pilot Michael Smith, smiling confidently. Mission Specialists Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, and Ronald McNair, all radiating excitement as they waved to NASA staff. Payload Specialist Gregory Jarvis, grinning wide, trying to hide his nerves. And Krista McAuliffe, the school teacher selected as the first civilian in space, walking with a mix of awe and pure optimism. She was going to teach a lesson from orbit. The crew boarded the shuttle one by one, disappearing into the white elevator tower that led to the spacecraft. Photographers captured everything – their faces, their waves, their cheerful banter as they climbed the stairs. There was no fear, no hesitation, just determination and the thrill of making history. But behind those photographs lies a devastating truth. Icicles hung from the launch pad that morning. The temperature had plunged below freezing, and in the boosters beneath that shuttle were rubber O-rings never designed to function in the cold.
As the crew strapped into their seats, the Challenger stood tall against a sky that looked painfully ordinary. Judith Resnick joked with Mission Control. Krishna McAuliffe rehearsed her lesson in her head. Onizuka adjusted his gloves. They were minutes away from the adventure of a lifetime. At 11:38 a.m., the engines ignited. Challenger roared upward, cutting through the morning air. Spectators cheered. Teachers cried with pride. The crew's families watched with hearts racing. And then, 73 seconds after liftoff, a bright flash erupted from the boosters. The shuttle veered sideways. A white and orange fireball blossomed across the sky. The voices on the ground fell silent. The cheers stopped instantly. The crew never had a chance. That morning's photographs, those smiling faces boarding the shuttle, became symbols of hope, courage, and the heartbreaking fragility of exploration. They are haunting because they show nothing wrong. Everything seems routine. Everything seems safe. Everything seems normal. And yet, the fate of all 7 astronauts was sealed before they ever left the launch pad. The Challenger crew boarded with dreams of space and became legends written into the history of human exploration.
May 6, 1937, Lakehurst, New Jersey. A perfect day for history to be made. The LZ-129 Hindenburg, the largest airship ever built, was gliding toward its mooring mast. Thousands of spectators had gathered, cameras poised, children craning their necks. The silver and red Zeppelin, longer than a football field, was a symbol of human ambition, the pinnacle of luxury and engineering. Photographers captured every angle: the sleek hull, the windows of the passenger cabins, the people waving from the deck. No one had any idea that in mere seconds, history itself would erupt in fire. At 7:25 p.m., as the Hindenburg descended toward its landing mooring, a faint crackling noise was heard. Then, in less than half a minute, the airship was engulfed in flames. Photographs from that moment freeze a horror that seems impossible. A massive, glowing fireball consumes the tail of the airship. Sheets of flaming hydrogen peel away, twisting and collapsing. Smoke and sparks streak across the sky, turning the evening into a living nightmare. Passengers are seen jumping from the gondola, some caught mid-air, others clutching onto debris. Ground crew and onlookers run desperately, faces frozen in terror. The fire spread so fast because the Hindenburg was filled with highly flammable hydrogen gas. Every inch of fabric and frame ignited almost instantly. In 34 terrifying seconds, the ship was reduced to charred metal and ashes. 36 people died that day, and dozens more were injured. But the photographs immortalize more than just tragedy. They capture chaos, shock, and disbelief. People in the foreground are frozen in mid-scream. Some are shielding their eyes. Some are running. Above them, the once majestic Zeppelin folds in on itself, glowing like a burning comet. The disaster was broadcast live on radio as well. But the photographs remain haunting because they show the moment when wonder turned into catastrophe. A symbol of human ambition, literally consumed by fire. The Hindenburg disaster is remembered not only as a tragic accident, but as a stark reminder that sometimes even our greatest achievements can be undone in an instant. A single image captures it all: the roar of flames, the horror of people, and the fleeting beauty of something spectacular, destroyed before the world's eyes.
April 14th, 1912. The RMS Titanic was sailing through the dark, frigid waters of the North Atlantic.
confident in its reputation as unsinkable. Luxurious dining rooms gleamed, grand staircases echoed with music, and passengers slept unaware of the looming danger ahead. That night, the ocean was calm, but the temperature had dropped sharply. Icebergs, giant and silent, floated through the darkness like ghostly sentinels. Ships' lookouts strained their eyes against the black water, but the Titanic was moving faster than safety recommended, a ship racing toward destiny. Minutes before disaster, photographs taken of icebergs in the North Atlantic revealed their true horror. Massive walls of ice rising dozens of meters above the sea, jagged and unyielding, glinting coldly in the faint starlight. They are beautiful and deadly. Each one is a frozen mountain, immovable, patient, a lethal hazard in the vast emptiness of the Atlantic. The Titanic's lookouts would spot one too late. At 11:40 p.m., the ship collided with an iceberg along its starboard bow. Steel hull plates crumpled, and water began pouring into the compartments below. Panic would soon follow, but the iceberg, the silent destroyer, remained intact, untouched, floating in the dark, indifferent to the human lives it had ended. The photograph of a North Atlantic iceberg reminds us of the deadly power of nature. Titanic passengers could not outrun it. The crew could not stop it. It was an invisible predator in the black night, a wall of ice that shattered dreams, lives, and the pride of a ship thought to be invincible. By 2:20 a.m., the Titanic had sunk completely. Over 1,500 people were lost, leaving behind only lifeboats scattered across the icy waters. The iceberg remained, a silent witness to the tragedy it caused. This single photo, taken hours or days before the collision, encapsulates the horror and inevitability of the event. It is a reminder that sometimes death doesn't announce itself. It simply waits in the shadows, silent, cold, and unstoppable.
The Russian Empire was in chaos. The Bolsheviks had overthrown the monarchy, and the former imperial family, the Romanovs, were prisoners in Ekaterinburg. Their world had shrunk to a single, dimly lit house called the Ipatiev House, where guards watched every step, every word, every gesture. And then, in the months leading up to their execution, someone took a photograph. A simple, quiet photograph. The last image ever captured of Emperor Nicholas II, Empress Alexandra, and their 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei. The image is deceptively calm. The family is dressed neatly, sitting and standing in a small room. Their faces show faint smiles, polite and composed, but the eyes betray a deeper story: fear, resignation, and the awareness of a fate they could not escape. Behind the facade of royalty is the shadow of imminent death. Nicholas sits stiffly, jaw tight, shoulders squared, a man trying to maintain dignity in the face of the impossible. Alexandra clutches a handkerchief, her fingers tense. The children, so young, so innocent, lean close to their parents, instinctively sensing the tension that adults try to hide. This photograph is haunting because it freezes a moment in time just before history closed in on them. Within hours, the Romanovs would be led to the basement of the Ipatiev house, where they were executed by firing squad. The bullets that ended their lives would echo far beyond that room, marking the final chapter of a dynasty that had ruled Russia for over 300 years. Historians and forensic experts later identified subtle details in the photo: the placement of hands, the tension in shoulders, the slight pale glow in their faces that suggest a family trying to appear normal while facing absolute horror. This is more than a photograph. It is a time capsule of human vulnerability, innocence, and the cruel hand of history. A royal family frozen forever in the last seconds before the world would erase them. The last photo of the Romanovs is a silent witness to tragedy, a haunting reminder that even power cannot shield anyone from the inevitability of death.
August 15th, 1998. Omagh, Northern Ireland. A quiet summer afternoon that should have been ordinary. Families strolling, children laughing, shops open for business, suddenly became one of the deadliest acts of terrorism in Irish history. At 3:10 p.m., a car bomb exploded in the heart of the town. The blast tore through streets crowded with civilians. Windows shattered, buildings collapsed, and flames engulfed vehicles in an instant. Smoke and dust turned the air thick and choking, reducing the town center to a scene of chaos and horror. Photographs taken in the immediate aftermath capture the devastation with terrifying clarity. Rubble litters the streets. Crumpled cars lie twisted beneath broken windows and steel beams. People are caught mid-motion, some running, some crouching in shock, some trying desperately to help the injured. Faces frozen in photographs show raw terror, disbelief, and grief. There is no pretense of safety, no pause for calm, just the chaos of lives shattered in seconds. The human toll was staggering. 29 people were killed, including children and teenagers. Scores more were injured, some scarred for life, physically and emotionally. The photos also reveal the overwhelming efforts of first responders, paramedics, firefighters, and volunteers rushing to treat the wounded amid smoke, dust, and the threat of further explosions. What makes the images haunting is the contrast between normalcy and catastrophe. Ordinary townspeople, caught in everyday routines, transformed instantly into victims of violence. The streets that had been safe and familiar moments before became a nightmarish scene of fire, blood, and debris. The Omagh bombing photos are more than historical evidence. They are a stark reminder of how fragile peace can be, how quickly a single act of hatred can destroy lives, and how communities respond in the face of unspeakable tragedy. These images haunt us not only because of what they show, but because of what they represent: the fragility of life and the suddenness of disaster.
May 17, 1980. Mount St. Helens, Washington State. A serene morning with clear skies revealing the majestic snow-capped peak of the volcano. Photographers, scientists, and hikers captured the mountain in its natural splendor, the calm before the storm. The photographs taken that day now carry a chilling significance. This was the last moment Mount St. Helens would be seen in peace. Nothing in these images hints at the catastrophe about to unfold. The forested slopes look untouched, the snow pristine, the surrounding lakes calm. A perfect postcard of nature, and a perfect disguise for the destruction to come. Just 3 days later, on May 18, 1980, the volcano violently awakened. A magnitude 5.1 earthquake triggered a massive landslide, the largest in recorded history, removing the entire north face of the mountain. In seconds, blast zones expanded, releasing a lateral eruption of superheated gas, ash, and rock at over 300 miles per hour. Trees flattened like matchsticks.
Rivers of mud and debris engulfed towns, and the sky darkened with ash clouds that rose 80,000 feet into the atmosphere. The final photos of Mount St. Helens before the eruption are haunting because they capture a universal truth. Disasters often strike when everything seems perfect, calm, and ordinary. A mountain that appeared eternal, frozen in peace, would soon be forever changed, and so would the land, the wildlife, and the lives of those living in its shadow. These images remind us that nature is patient, silent, and capable of sudden, unimaginable fury, leaving only photographs as witnesses to the moment before everything changed.
June 1937, Leh, Papua New Guinea. Amelia Earhart, the pioneering aviator, was preparing for the next leg of her historic attempt to circumnavigate the globe. Cameras captured her standing beside her Lockheed Electra, confident, composed, and full of determination. This photograph would become her last known image before vanishing, a moment frozen in time, charged with ambition and unknowable danger. Earhart's aviator goggles rest on her head, her flight jacket perfectly fitted, a calm smile on her face. To anyone looking at the photo, she seems fearless, ready to conquer the skies. But behind that smile lies the invisible tension of the unknown. She was flying over the vast Pacific Ocean, a route with few landmarks, no modern navigation aids, and treacherous weather that could change in an instant. The photograph belies the peril ahead: fuel limits, radio uncertainties, and the vast expanse of water below. 2 days later, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, disappeared over the central Pacific, never to be conclusively found. Her plane vanished, leaving behind only rumors, theories, and decades of speculation. And yet this photograph remains, a haunting reminder of a woman poised on the brink of history and mystery. It is eerie because it shows nothing of the danger, just calm, preparation, courage, and yet it is charged with the unspoken knowledge of what was to come. The last photo is both a celebration of human ambition and a portrait of ultimate uncertainty. Amelia Earhart's image captures more than a person. It captures the moment before legend, the instant before the unknown, and the fragile line between adventure and disappearance. It is a photograph of courage, curiosity, and the haunting power of the unanswered question: what really happened to her?
1347 to 1351. Europe. A plague unlike anything the world had seen before swept across the continent, killing an estimated 25 to 50 million people, roughly a third of Europe's population. The disease, later called the Black Death, struck fast and mercilessly, leaving towns and villages in smoke and silence. The mass graves from this era are some of the most chilling historical reminders of the pandemic. Historical illustrations and archaeological photographs show rows upon rows of bodies hastily buried in shallow pits, sometimes stacked like logs. Men, women, children, and even entire families were thrown together, often without coffins, because the sheer number of deaths made normal burial impossible. Images from excavations reveal skeletal remains with signs of rapid death, skulls, twisted bones, and in some cases, evidence of desperate attempts to escape. In historical drawings, monks and town officials are shown shoveling bodies into pits, faces masked, expressions grim, performing grim rituals for a world overtaken by death. Smoke from burning towns lingers in the background, a haunting backdrop to the human toll. The plague spread through fleas on rats, traveling via trade routes, ships, and merchants. But the human response, mass graves, abandoned towns, and fleeing citizens, made it seem even more terrifying. Cities emptied almost overnight,
Streets were silent, farms were untended, the dead were everywhere, and fear became as deadly as the disease itself. What makes these mass graves so haunting is their scale and anonymity. Individuals were not recorded. Names and stories vanished with the lives themselves. All that remained were bones, sometimes bearing clothing remnants, and the earth that covered them, a silent witness to humanity's vulnerability. The Black Death mass graves are more than archaeological sites. They are reminders of a time when life was fragile, death was swift, and society itself teetered on the edge of collapse. Each photograph, each illustration, is a portal into a world where entire communities could vanish in weeks, leaving only the earth and the bones as testimony. These images are not just history. They are a warning, a reminder that disease, fear, and the unstoppable force of nature can strike with sudden, terrifying power, and that even the strongest civilizations are not immune.
The world was just emerging from the horrors of World War I, but humanity faced a new, invisible enemy, the Spanish flu. Unlike any disease seen before, it spread with terrifying speed, killing the young, the old, and the strong alike, an estimated 50 million people worldwide. Photographs from this pandemic reveal a world overwhelmed by death. In cities and towns, bodies were stacked in makeshift morgues. Streets once filled with life became silent corridors of death. Workers in masks carried corpses through alleyways, sometimes on carts, sometimes in wheelbarrows. Hospitals overflowed. Families buried loved ones in haste, often skipping coffins entirely. Some images show lines of the dead in hospitals, their faces pale and lifeless, eyes closed, bodies covered with sheets. Others reveal mass graves, shallow pits hastily dug as the sheer number of fatalities outpaced any normal funeral practices. In New York, Philadelphia, and London, morgue wagons trundled through the streets, delivering bodies to crematories and cemeteries that were ill-equipped for the scale of death. The Spanish flu was horrifying because it was silent and indiscriminate. Healthy young adults fell first. Nurses and doctors contracted the virus despite precautions. Entire households vanished in a week. Children were left orphaned. Cities left overwhelmed. Death became visible in every photograph. Anonymity stacked upon anonymity. Faces forgotten even as the pandemic burned through the world. What makes these images unforgettable is the scale of human vulnerability. Unlike battlefields or natural disasters, there was no explosion, no fire, no single moment of horror. The Spanish flu killed slowly, invisibly, yet utterly. And when its toll was recorded in photographs, the horror became real. Lines of bodies, streets lined with the dead, families erased in silent tragedy. The bodies of the Spanish flu are a chilling reminder that disease can strike without warning, without prejudice, and without mercy. Every photograph from 1918 captures not just death, but the fragility of civilization itself when faced with an unstoppable, invisible enemy. These images remain haunting nearly a century later, a testament to one of history's deadliest and most terrifying pandemics.
December 17, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. During the opening days of what would become the Battle of the Bulge, American soldiers captured by the German SS were marched into a field near the small village of Malmedy. They were prisoners of war, unarmed, and trusting in the rules of combat that the Geneva Convention guaranteed. But trust would be brutally betrayed.
The massacre that followed claimed 84 American lives in a single horrific act of violence. Photographs taken after the atrocity reveal the sheer scale of the horror. Soldiers lined up in the snow, bodies strewn across the ground, some with hands bound behind their backs, faces frozen in fear and disbelief. Smoke from nearby fires mingled with the winter mist, giving the scene an otherworldly, almost nightmarish quality. Investigators later described the bodies as a chilling mixture of execution-style killings and desperate struggle. Some had been shot multiple times. Others had fallen while trying to escape. The snow itself was stained red. Nearby were abandoned rifles, fallen helmets, and the remnants of what should have been an ordinary military capture turned into an execution in cold blood. The Malmedy massacre photographs are horrifying, not just for the violence, but for the calm that lingers in the images. Unlike a battlefield, there is no combat, no exchange of fire, no defense, only victims and the aftermath, a silent testament to human cruelty. This massacre would become a symbol of Nazi brutality during the Ardennes offensive. When the photographs circulated among Allied forces and the world press, they shocked the conscience of nations. They revealed the reality of war beyond strategy and tactics, the simple, devastating human cost of hatred and disregard for life. The Malmedy victims are remembered not just as soldiers, but as innocents caught in the machinery of war. The photographs serve as chilling reminders that in war, sometimes the deadliest threats come not from bullets alone, but from the deliberate cruelty of men. Every image from Malmedy is a frozen moment of terror and injustice, a haunting testament to lives stolen in cold blood, and a warning etched into history that some horrors of war cannot be ignored.
January 31st to February 1st, 1953. The North Sea unleashed a catastrophic storm surge on the coasts of the Netherlands, Belgium, and eastern England. Tides combined with hurricane-force winds to breach dikes and flood entire towns overnight, creating one of the deadliest natural disasters of the 20th century in Europe. Photographs taken in the aftermath capture the scale of devastation with haunting clarity. Entire villages were submerged, streets became rivers, houses were partially or completely destroyed, their walls toppled, roofs ripped away, and interiors left exposed to the freezing waters. People stand waist-deep in icy water, faces etched with exhaustion, disbelief, and grief. Livestock, cars, and household belongings float amid debris, a visual testament to lives torn apart in hours. The human toll was staggering. Over 2,500 people killed, tens of thousands displaced, and entire communities left homeless. The images show rescue operations in full swing, boats navigating flooded streets, soldiers carrying children on their shoulders, and volunteers struggling to move the wounded to temporary shelters. One of the most haunting aspects of the photographs is the combination of destruction and emptiness. Fields once filled with activity lie submerged underwater. Churches, schools, and shops are mere shells. Families who survived stare silently at what was once their home, now reduced to splintered wood and mud. The flood's aftermath is a portrait of human vulnerability in the face of unstoppable natural forces. These images also show the resilience of communities, neighbors helping neighbors, makeshift rescue boats, and emergency shelters where strangers offered warmth and safety. Amid the wreckage, there is a silent testament to human endurance and solidarity. The 1953 North Sea flood photos are chilling because they capture both the destructive power of nature and the fragility of human life. Every destroyed house, every displaced family, and every flooded street tells a story of loss, survival, and the urgent need to respect the forces beyond our control. These images remain a stark reminder that even in modern times, nature can strike suddenly, transforming familiar landscapes into scenes of unimaginable devastation, and leaving photographs as witnesses to both tragedy and resilience.
January 17, 1912, Antarctica. The British Antarctic expedition, led by Captain Robert Falcon Scott, had achieved the impossible. They reached the South Pole. But glory came at a devastating cost. They arrived only to discover that Roald Amundsen's Norwegian team had beaten them by over a month. The race was lost, but survival became the new mission. The photographs taken during Scott's return journey are haunting. The last known photo shows the team huddled in the endless whiteness, faces gaunt, clothing tattered, and bodies weighed down by frostbite, exhaustion, and malnutrition. Snow swirls around them, blinding and relentless. The horizon stretches endlessly, a stark reminder of the unforgiving Antarctic landscape. These are not heroic poses. They are men clinging to life, fighting against the cold, hunger, and fatigue. Scott's expression is pale and weary, but resolute, an unspoken acceptance of the peril surrounding them. Sledges lie in the snow, supplies depleted, and every step forward was a battle against the merciless elements. Tragically, these photographs capture a moment of desperation that would soon become eternal. Scott and his team perished in their tent only 11 miles from a supply depot, the final victims of frost, exhaustion, and extreme weather. Their bodies, discovered months later, were surrounded by the instruments, journals, and records of their doomed expedition. The last photo of Robert Falcon Scott's team is chilling, because it freezes a moment of human courage against impossible odds. There is no action, no excitement, just the silent, frozen endurance of men at the edge of survival. It is a testament to ambition, perseverance, and the ultimate cost of exploration. These images endure as reminders that the pursuit of knowledge and glory can lead to extraordinary feats, and sometimes to the final confrontation with nature itself. Scott's last photograph is both a tribute and a warning. The Antarctic is beautiful, but it is absolute, indifferent, and deadly.
November 18, 1978, Jonestown, Guyana. The remote settlement of the People's Temple, led by Jim Jones, became the site of one of the most horrifying events in modern history. Over 900 men, women, and children would die that day, most by drinking cyanide-laced punch in a mass suicide orchestrated by their cult leader. Photographs taken after the tragedy reveal a scene almost impossible to comprehend. Rows of bodies lie on the ground, some covered by sheets, some visible in the red dust of the Guyanese jungle. Children cling to parents, frozen in their final moments. The jungle itself seems to loom over the settlement, silent and indifferent to the human horror beneath its canopy. The photographs are striking for their raw, unnerving stillness. There is no violence in motion, no struggle caught mid-action, only the aftermath of obedience, fear, and desperation. Faces are calm in some, terrified in others, reflecting the confusion and coercion that defined the last hours of Jonestown. What makes these photos truly haunting is the scale of the tragedy. Entire families vanished together. The settlement, once bustling with hopeful followers, is eerily empty and quiet. Supplies, papers, and personal belongings remain, scattered, frozen in time.
The photographs are a stark reminder that manipulation, ideology, and blind trust can turn communities into graves. The Jonestown mass suicide photos are more than documentation. They are a testament to the darkest corners of human psychology, to the power of control, and the devastating consequences when people surrender their free will. Each image whispers the same chilling truth. Faith and fear, when twisted, can become deadly. Even decades later, these photographs remain haunting. They force us to confront questions about obedience, leadership, and the fragility of human decision-making. Lessons written in the silent faces of the Jonestown victims.
December 2nd, 1984, Bhopal, India. At night, the Union Carbide pesticide plant released methyl isocyanate gas into the air, a cloud invisible, odorless, and deadly. Within minutes, the city was enveloped in a toxic fog that would become one of the worst industrial disasters in history. Photographs taken in the immediate aftermath show chaos, suffering, and confusion. People stumble through streets, eyes burning, skin blistered, gasping for air. Families clutch children, desperately trying to escape the invisible killer. Hospitals overflow, unable to handle the sheer number of casualties. Corpses lay in homes and along roadsides, victims claimed by the gas before help could arrive. The death toll is staggering, over 3,700 confirmed dead in the first few days, with tens of thousands more affected long-term. Photographs reveal the human cost in raw detail. Faces frozen in pain, bodies collapsed in alleys, children carried by parents who are themselves struggling to breathe. The city becomes a surreal, apocalyptic scene. What makes these images haunting is the silent, invisible force behind the disaster. Unlike explosions or fires, the gas left no immediate visible destruction to buildings, only its victims. Every photograph is a frozen moment of suffering, a visual record of how quickly a modern city can descend into horror when industrial safety fails. The Bhopal gas tragedy photos are a testament to human vulnerability in the face of negligence and disaster. They remind us of lives disrupted, families destroyed, and the long-lasting impact of corporate and systemic failure. Streets once filled with laughter are replaced by death, panic, and despair. Even decades later, these images remain haunting. They are silent witnesses to the lives lost and the suffering endured, showing us the devastating consequences when human error and indifference collide with the fragility of life. They are a warning and a memorial. Never forget the 3,700 souls taken in a single night, and the thousands whose lives were forever scarred.
January 16, 2003, Cape Canaveral, Florida. The Space Shuttle Columbia prepared for its final mission, STS-107, carrying 7 astronauts into orbit. Photographers captured the crew in their pre-launch moments, faces bright with excitement, focus, and anticipation. This photograph would become their last known image together, a frozen moment before tragedy struck. Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, mission specialist David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Michael Anderson, Laurel Clark, and payload specialist Ilan Ramon stand together, smiling in their orange flight suits, radiating the courage and dedication that define space exploration. The photo shows calm professionalism. Every detail speaks of preparation. Gloves adjusted, helmets in hand, mission patches proudly displayed. There is no hint of the danger ahead, no indication of the disaster that would soon unfold. Only the human desire to explore, to push boundaries, to touch the edge of the unknown. Just over 16 days later, on February 1, 2003, Columbia disintegrated during re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. All 7 astronauts perished as the shuttle broke apart over Texas and Louisiana.
The crew's bodies and debris scattered across hundreds of miles, leaving only photographs, flight data, and memories to tell the story of their bravery. The last photo of the Columbia crew is haunting because it captures human ambition and vulnerability simultaneously. It shows us courage in the face of risk, teamwork in its purest form, and the fleeting nature of life when humanity reaches for the stars. This image endures as a tribute to exploration, a memorial to the astronauts who dared to venture beyond our world, and a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is often accompanied by unimaginable sacrifice. The photo freezes them in life, smiling, hopeful, and united, just moments before history claimed them, making it both inspiring and profoundly tragic.
January 16, 1912. Villisca, Iowa. The Moore family home, a quiet wooden house on a modest street, became the scene of one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history. Photographs of the house after the tragedy reveal a scene of eerie stillness. Windows are dark and lifeless. Inside, the rooms are silent except for the shadows cast by overturned furniture. The Moore family, parents Josiah and Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 visiting friends were brutally killed in their beds, all struck with an axe during the night. The crime scene, frozen in photographs, shows sheets soaked in blood, bodies covered with quilts, and the small, intimate rooms of daily life turned into a chilling tableau of violence. The photographs are haunting because they capture the aftermath, not the act. There are no screams, no struggle caught on film, only the silence of death. Investigators are visible in some images, carefully documenting the scene, but their presence cannot erase the horror. Every photograph is a frozen moment of innocence lost, of ordinary life shattered in an instant. What makes the Moore murder so chilling is the unknown perpetrator. No one was ever convicted, and theories range from a transient killer to someone with a personal vendetta, leaving the house itself a silent witness to mystery and fear. Photographs of the house, now empty except for investigators and evidence markers, convey the lingering dread and unanswered questions. The Moore family axe murder photos are more than historical records. They are a glimpse into the darkest corners of human nature, a place where safety and family life were violated without warning. Each image tells a story of innocence destroyed and the terrifying reality that danger can strike where we feel safest. Even today, the house stands or is preserved for historical tours, but the photographs remain the most haunting evidence of that night, capturing the chilling quiet after unimaginable violence. May 22, 1960. Southern Chile. At 3:11 a.m., the ground shook violently as the Valdivia earthquake, the strongest ever recorded in history, struck with a magnitude of 9.5. Cities crumbled, rivers changed course, and the landscape itself was forever altered. Photographs taken in the aftermath show entire towns reduced to rubble. Buildings that had stood for decades lie in splintered ruins. Roads cracked and buckled. Bridges collapsed into swollen rivers. People wander through streets filled with debris, faces etched with shock, despair, and disbelief. Makeshift shelters rise from the wreckage as survivors clutch their few remaining possessions, trying to comprehend a world turned upside down. The earthquake triggered massive tsunamis, sweeping away coastal villages and leaving ships stranded on land. Photographs reveal twisted metal, shattered wood, and waterlogged homes, evidence of both the seismic force and the tsunami's destructive power. Trees are uprooted, cars overturned, and the rivers swollen with mud and debris. The human toll was catastrophic. Over 2,000 lives lost, tens of thousands injured, and hundreds of thousands left homeless. The photographs are haunting not only because of the destruction, but because they capture a civilization momentarily powerless before the force of nature. Children cling to parents. Elderly survivors sit dazed in the ruins. Entire neighborhoods vanish, leaving only emptiness and devastation. What makes these images unforgettable is the scale of devastation. The earthquake reshaped valleys, destroyed infrastructure, and left scars on the land visible even from the air. It was a reminder that nature's power is absolute, indifferent, and unstoppable. The 1960 Valdivia earthquake destruction photos are not just records, they are testaments to resilience. Amid the chaos, survivors rebuild, helping neighbors, clearing streets and salvaging what they can. Yet the photographs remain haunting, frozen reminders of the moment when the Earth itself rebelled and a thriving region was brought to its knees in minutes.
December 1916, St. Petersburg, Russia. Grigori Rasputin, the infamous mad monk and controversial advisor to Tsarina Alexandra, had become a figure of fear, fascination, and scandal. Powerful, enigmatic, and rumored to wield influence over the Russian royal family, his enemies conspired to end his life. The photograph taken just before his assassination captures Rasputin in the final hours of his tumultuous existence. His long hair and beard frame a face lined with intensity, and his piercing eyes seem to stare straight through the camera, alive with defiance, even in the shadow of impending death. He wears a dark robe, simple but hauntingly iconic, as if his presence alone fills the room with an almost supernatural aura. This image is haunting because it freezes a man whose life was a storm of rumors, politics, and mysticism, moments before his violent end. Later accounts describe his murder. Poisoned wine and cakes failed to kill him. He was shot multiple times, beaten, and finally thrown into the icy Neva River. Yet in this photograph, there is a calm, unsettling vitality, a glimpse of the man before myth overtook reality. Historians note subtle details in the photo: the slightly tilted head, the intensity in his eyes, the casual positioning of his hands, all suggesting a man aware of danger, yet unbowed by it. It's almost as if the photograph preserves not just his likeness, but his spirit, the reason Rasputin became legend in life and in death. The last photo of Rasputin is a chilling testament to a life steeped in controversy, mysticism, and danger. It captures a man on the brink of murder, frozen in the eerie calm before history closed the final chapter. This image reminds us that some figures, larger than life in their time, weave behind only photographs and stories, but the aura, the myth, and the terror they inspired endure forever.
April 14th, 1935. The Great Plains, United States. A wall of dust, dark as midnight, rolled across Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and beyond. A storm so massive it blotted out the sun. Farmers would call it Black Sunday. Photographs from that day are terrifying in their scale. The sky is a thick, swirling brown, reaching miles into the air. Trees, fences, and farmhouses are swallowed in dust. People, caught in the storm, wear scarves and goggles, shielding their eyes and mouths, while children cling to parents, trying to survive the suffocating air. Livestock and crops vanish beneath the choking cloud. The land itself seems to have turned against its inhabitants. The storm was not just weather, it was the culmination of years of drought, soil mismanagement, and economic hardship. Families who had worked the land for generations now faced the fury of nature, with their livelihoods literally buried beneath it.
Homes were abandoned, schools closed. Dust infiltrated every corner of life, making every breath a struggle. These photographs are haunting because they capture both force and helplessness. The human figures are dwarfed by the immense storm, reminding viewers that even communities built over generations can be rendered powerless in a single, devastating day. Cars disappear into clouds of dust, fences collapse, and the horizon vanishes entirely, leaving nothing but chaos and darkness. Black Sunday became a symbol of the Dust Bowl era, illustrating the fragility of human life when pitted against environmental catastrophe. The images tell stories of desperation, endurance, and survival, showing people persevering even as the sky itself seems to conspire against them. These photographs remain iconic, a visual record of nature's overwhelming power, the consequences of human error, and the courage of those who lived through one of America's darkest environmental disasters. They remind us that sometimes the earth itself can rise up, turning a familiar landscape into a blinding, suffocating nightmare in an instant.
December 6, 1917. Halifax, Nova Scotia. The bustling harbor was suddenly transformed into a scene of catastrophic destruction. A collision between the munitions ship SS Mont Blanc and the Norwegian vessel SS Immo triggered the largest human-made explosion prior to the atomic age. Photographs of the aftermath reveal an apocalyptic cityscape. Buildings flattened, streets littered with debris, windows shattered for miles. Ships in the harbor are twisted and overturned, some hurled onto land as if by some supernatural force. Trees are stripped bare. Smoke rises in thick plumes, obscuring the sky and turning day into night. People wander dazed through rubble-strewn streets, searching for loved ones, their faces a mixture of shock, grief, and disbelief. The human toll was staggering. Over 1,900 killed, nearly 9,000 injured, and tens of thousands left homeless. The photographs capture the chaos and devastation, the city reduced to splinters, families displaced, and ordinary life obliterated in a single instant. Emergency responders navigate the ruins, carrying the wounded, digging through rubble, and trying to save those trapped beneath fallen structures. What makes these images so haunting is the scale of destruction and the immediacy of human suffering. Unlike war, this disaster struck a city at peace, unprepared, and completely vulnerable. The photographs show a landscape that is unrecognizable, yet every detail, upturned carriages, shattered walls, twisted steel, speaks of lives abruptly torn apart. The Halifax explosion ruins are more than historical documentation. They are a testament to the fragility of human life and infrastructure. They show how quickly ordinary existence can collapse under force beyond comprehension. Every photograph is a frozen scream, a reminder that tragedy can strike without warning, leaving destruction and heartbreak in its wake. These images remain haunting nearly a century later, capturing the raw, overwhelming power of disaster and the resilience of a city that would rise from ashes to rebuild.
Rwanda. In just 100 days, nearly 1 million people were brutally murdered in one of the fastest and most horrifying genocides in modern history. The killings were swift, ruthless, and personal, neighbors turning on neighbors, machetes and guns replacing trust and community. Photographs taken during the recovery of mass graves reveal a landscape of silence, death, and devastation. Skeletal remains, often disarticulated, are carefully exhumed by forensic teams and volunteers. Rows of skulls lie side by side, their hollow eye sockets staring into a past filled with unimaginable terror. Clothes, jewelry, and remnants of personal belongings are scattered among the bones, silent testimonies of lives stolen in an instant. The photographs are haunting, not only because of the scale of the atrocity, but because of the humanity frozen in death.
Each skull represents a story, a family, a future violently erased. Recovery teams work meticulously, treating each bone with care, even as the weight of history presses down. Children's bones, women's, men's, they all lie together, a grim mosaic of humanity's worst impulses. These photographs also capture the aftermath of silence and fear. Villages are abandoned, fields empty, and the landscape scarred with graves hidden beneath the earth. The recovery process is both scientific and spiritual, as Rwanda struggles to confront and remember the horror that unfolded in communities once alive with laughter and life. The Rwandan genocide skull recovery photos are a stark reminder of the consequences of hatred, dehumanization, and indifference. They force the viewer to confront a reality where ordinary people became victims of extraordinary cruelty, and where survival was often random and fleeting. Even decades later, these images remain haunting. They are not just historical evidence, they are memorials to those who were silenced, and a warning of the depths to which humanity can descend when fear and violence go unchecked. Every skull is a voice lost, every grave a story cut short, and every photograph a testament to the imperative never to forget.
July 1980. The United States. An oppressive heat wave gripped much of the country, turning cities into furnaces and overwhelming infrastructure. Temperatures soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, for weeks, with humidity magnifying the deadly effect. People struggled to breathe. Electricity failed under the demand for cooling, and vulnerable populations, elderly, sick, and poor, bore the brunt of nature's invisible assault. Photographs from the time show streets emptying under the blistering sun, hospital emergency rooms overflowing with victims of heat stroke, dehydration, and exhaustion. Lines of patients wait for relief while cooling centers strain to provide water and respite. Outside, sidewalks shimmer in the heat, and cars bake in parking lots, their interiors like ovens. Some images capture makeshift relief stations where volunteers hand out water to those who could barely stand. The human toll was devastating, over 1,700 deaths in the U.S. alone and tens of thousands hospitalized. News photographs show faces flushed and gasping, families desperate for relief, and workers collapsing from exhaustion. The heat wave didn't discriminate. It affected the young, the elderly, the rich, and the poor alike. What makes these images haunting is the silent, relentless threat of heat. Unlike floods, fires, or storms, there is no dramatic crash or roar. The danger is invisible, creeping into homes, streets, and hospitals, seizing life quietly but mercilessly. Each photograph is a testament to vulnerability in the face of an unyielding natural force. The 1980 heatwave photos are a stark reminder that nature's deadliest forces are not always dramatic. Sometimes they arrive as stillness, as sweltering air, as a sun that refuses to set, leaving communities reeling and lives lost. These images endure not only as historical records, but as warnings that the Earth can be lethally unforgiving and human fragility becomes painfully evident when the temperature rises beyond what we can endure. January 15, 1919, Boston, Massachusetts. A massive storage tank holding 2.3 million gallons of industrial molasses burst in the North End neighborhood, releasing a wave of sticky, deadly syrup into the streets. What should have been a quiet winter day became an unimaginable disaster. Photographs taken after the flood reveal a surreal scene. Buildings are splattered with thick molasses. Streets are coated in dark, viscous liquid, almost waist-deep in some areas. People and animals were caught in the torrent. Cars and wagons overturned, wooden fences splintered, and debris carried along by the relentless wave. First responders navigate the sticky chaos, rescuing survivors trapped in the thick, suffocating substance. The human toll was tragic. 21 people killed, dozens injured, and the neighborhood left in a mess that would take weeks to clear. Photographs show the aftermath with streets eerily quiet, save for emergency workers and investigators picking through the debris. Molasses clings to everything – buildings, trees, and even the survivors' clothing, making the disaster appear almost otherworldly. What makes these images haunting is the bizarre, almost absurd nature of the tragedy. It was neither war nor storm, yet it killed, trapped, and destroyed with a silent, unstoppable force. The molasses, heavy and unforgiving, became both a physical and psychological barrier, turning a familiar cityscape into a sticky, nightmarish trap. The Great Molasses Flood photos are more than historical oddities. They are a reminder that disasters can strike in unexpected forms, and that even everyday substances, when combined with negligence or poor engineering, can become deadly. Every image tells a story of chaos, human resilience, and the strange, horrifying power of industrial accidents.
January 30th, 1969. London, England. The Beatles, legends of music and culture, stepped onto the roof of Apple Corps' headquarters for what would become their final public performance together. Cameras captured them in this spontaneous moment, instruments in hand, the city stretching out below them, unaware that history was unfolding above. This photograph is iconic, not just because of the music, but because it captures the tension, energy, and fleeting joy of a band at the end of an era. John Lennon adjusts his guitar, Paul McCartney leans into the microphone, George Harrison plays with quiet intensity, and Ringo Starr keeps rhythm with calm focus. The sunlight reflects off the rooftop, highlighting the contrast between the vibrant youth of the band and the gravity of an impending breakup. The photo freezes a moment of pure urban rebellion and creativity. Noise complaints would soon interrupt the performance, police would arrive, and the rooftop session would end abruptly. But the image preserves the thrill, spontaneity, and camaraderie of four men united by music, even as their personal paths were beginning to diverge. What makes this photograph haunting is its sense of finality. Unlike staged portraits or studio shots, it captures a band alive, performing, and yet unknowingly saying goodbye to an era of collective magic. The city streets below are silent witnesses to an event that would be immortalized in sound, film, and memory. The last photo of the Beatles on the rooftop is more than a historical snapshot. It is a symbol of fleeting genius, the impermanence of even the brightest moments, and the power of music to carve a permanent place in history. It reminds us that sometimes the most legendary performances happen without warning, without fanfare, and just above the streets we walk every day.
June 8, 1972, Trang Bang, South Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, a napalm strike devastated a village, and a single photograph would come to define the horror of conflict. The image shows 9-year-old Phan T. Kim Phuc running down a road, her skin burned by napalm, her clothes destroyed, and her face twisted in terror and pain. Behind her, soldiers and fellow villagers flee in panic, smoke rising in thick, choking clouds. The image captures the raw, human cost of war in an instant. Kim Phuc's small frame and exposed suffering make the horrors tangible, impossible to ignore. The image is both horrifying and hauntingly beautiful in its power to convey innocence lost amidst violence. faces in the background, twisted by fear and confusion, add depth to the scene, a community engulfed in chaos, fleeing a weapon of unspeakable destruction. What makes this photograph iconic is not just the tragedy it depicts, but the moral shock it delivered to the world. Millions saw it in newspapers and magazines, confronting the public with the reality of modern warfare. Civilians, including children, were not collateral. They were victims of indiscriminate destruction. Later, Kim Phuc survived, her story becoming a symbol of resilience and forgiveness. Yet this photograph remains a haunting reminder of the moment when innocence collided with violence, frozen forever in a frame that tells a story words could never fully capture. The Vietnam Napalm Girl photo is a testament to the power of imagery to change minds and expose the truth. It reminds us that war is not abstract. It is human, painful, and forever etched into the faces of those who endure it. Every time we look at this photo, we are forced to confront the fragility of life and the enduring consequences of human conflict.
March 20th, 1995, Tokyo, Japan. During the morning rush hour, the city's subway system became a deadly trap. Members of the Aum Shinrikyo cult released sarin gas, a colorless, odorless nerve agent, into crowded trains, turning a routine commute into a nightmare. Photographs from the aftermath are chilling. Commuters lie on subway platforms, faces pale and eyes wide with terror. People are carried out on stretchers, some vomiting, others convulsing, unable to breathe or see through the chaos. Smoke-like vapors linger in tunnels as emergency responders in masks navigate the confined, suffocating space. Blood pressure monitors, oxygen tanks, and medical equipment litter the stations as doctors and paramedics work frantically to save lives. The attack killed 13 people immediately, injured over 5,000, and left thousands traumatized physically and mentally. The images capture the sheer unpredictability and horror of chemical warfare in a modern city. Ordinary commuters, children, and office workers became victims of an invisible, indiscriminate killer. What makes these photographs particularly haunting is the contrast between normalcy and devastation. One moment, it was a normal weekday morning. Then, in seconds, the underground tunnels became a scene of panic, suffering, and death. People are frozen mid-action in some images, reaching for help, stumbling, or collapsing, illustrating the suddenness of terror. The Aum Shinrikyo subway attack photos are more than news. They are lessons in vulnerability and human resilience. They reveal the fragility of urban life in the face of unseen threats and the bravery of first responders who risked exposure to save others. Even decades later, these images remain haunting. They serve as a stark reminder that terror can strike anywhere, silently and without warning, leaving lives altered and cities scarred in a single devastating moment.
September 8, 1900, Galveston, Texas. A powerful hurricane, with winds exceeding 135 miles per hour, struck the island city with devastating force, leveling homes, uprooting trees, and turning streets into rivers. It remains the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history, claiming an estimated 8,000 to 12,000 lives. Photographs from the aftermath reveal utter destruction. Wooden homes splintered, roofs torn off, and debris littering streets as far as the eye can see. Water surges carry boats, furniture, and entire trees into the wreckage. People stand stunned amid the ruins, faces pale and covered in grime,
trying to salvage what little remains of their lives. In some images, temporary shelters or makeshift camps appear, offering brief respite from the overwhelming chaos. The human toll is visible in every frame. Families mourn lost loved ones. Bodies float in flooded streets. Survivors search desperately for neighbors, children, and pets. The city's skyline, once dotted with elegant Victorian homes and bustling businesses, is reduced to shattered timbers and mud. What makes these photographs haunting is the sheer scale of destruction and human vulnerability. Unlike modern disasters, there were no early warnings, no evacuation systems, just the unstoppable power of nature striking a community unprepared. Every photograph is a frozen moment of shock, grief, and survival against impossible odds. The 1900 Galveston hurricane damage photos are more than historical documentation. They are a testament to nature's indiscriminate fury and the fragility of human settlements. They show how quickly normal life can be obliterated, leaving only ruins, memories, and the haunting faces of those who survived. These images endure as a reminder of the power of storms, the impermanence of human structures, and the courage of communities that rebuild in the face of overwhelming devastation.
1975 to 1979. Cambodia. Under the Khmer Rouge regime, Pol Pot orchestrated a brutal campaign of genocide, targeting intellectuals, ethnic minorities, and anyone considered an enemy of the state. The result? Nearly 2 million people murdered and mass graves scattered across the countryside, now known as the Killing Fields. Photographs from archaeological and memorial sites show maps and arrangements of skulls and bones, carefully cataloged to illustrate the scope of the atrocities. Piles of human skulls, some with bullet holes, others fractured, form haunting patterns, almost like a grim atlas of death. Each photograph captures both scale and individuality. Every skull once belonged to a person with a life, a story, a family. These images are haunting because they confront viewers with the magnitude of systematic murder. Maps show where thousands were buried, evidence of the Khmer Rouge's methodical execution of humanity itself. Bones are often stacked for study and memorial, creating visual records of horror and remembrance. What makes these photographs chilling is the combination of precision and horror. They reveal a regime that not only killed, but cataloged, calculated, and left traces so future generations could witness the atrocity. Faces of the victims, though now only bones, communicate the terror, helplessness, and innocence that was stolen. The Cambodian Killing Fields skull map photos are more than historical evidence. They are memorials, lessons etched in bone and earth, demanding that the world remembers. They are a reminder that genocide is not abstract. It is concrete, systematic, and leaves scars not just on land, but on the human conscience. Every photograph forces us to confront the unimaginable scale of human cruelty, to acknowledge the lives erased, and to vow never to forget the victims of the killing fields.
March 18, 1944. Near Naples, Italy, during the height of World War II, Mount Vesuvius erupted violently, spewing lava, ash, and pyroclastic flows across nearby villages. The eruption forced both soldiers and civilians to flee, as molten rivers of rock consumed homes, roads, and farmland, creating a surreal and terrifying landscape. Photographs from the time capture a world caught between war and nature's fury. Smoke and ash clouds rise into the sky, obscuring sunlight. Lava flows carved destructive paths through villages. Soldiers, civilians, and displaced families appear in images, fleeing the molten tide with whatever they can carry. Tanks, jeeps, and artillery are abandoned, half buried in ash, evidence of a military campaign interrupted by the unstoppable force of the volcano. The human toll was severe. Hundreds lost homes, crops, and livelihoods, while the ever-present threat of lava and ash burned indiscriminately. Photographs show streets choked with debris, charred trees and rooftops collapsing under layers of volcanic rock. Even military personnel, engaged in the nearby Allied campaign, are forced to confront a disaster far beyond their training or preparation. What makes these images haunting is the contrast between human conflict and nature's indifference. Soldiers and civilians alike, engaged in war or survival, are dwarfed by molten rivers and ash clouds that move with terrifying, inexorable force. Every photograph is a reminder that even amid global chaos, the planet retains a power all its own. Mount Vesuvius's 1944 eruption photos are more than historical documentation. They're a stunning intersection of natural disaster and human history, capturing moments of panic, courage, and the fragility of life when faced with forces beyond control. These images endure as a reminder that even during humanity's darkest wars, nature remains indifferent, unstoppable, and awe-inspiring, shaping history in ways no human conflict ever could.
October 21st, 1966. Aberfan, Wales. A coal waste tip piled high above a small village school became a ticking time bomb. After days of heavy rain, the unstable mass of coal slurry collapsed, sending a black, crushing avalanche of debris rushing downhill. In seconds, it engulfed Pontglass Junior School, homes, and streets, leaving horror and devastation in its wake. Photographs from the aftermath reveal an unimaginable scene of destruction. The school is almost completely buried, windows shattered, walls demolished, and rooftops crushed beneath tons of coal waste. Streets are impassable, covered in black sludge, and rescuers wade through the muck, desperately trying to reach survivors. Children's shoes, books, and personal belongings float or are partially buried, haunting reminders of the lives abruptly ended. The human toll was catastrophic. 144 people killed, including 116 children, and many more injured or traumatized. Photographs capture the grief etched on the faces of rescuers, parents, and villagers, the despair intensified by the realization that so many of the victims were the youngest and most innocent. What makes these images haunting is the sheer suddenness and preventability of the tragedy. The coal tip had been known to be unstable, yet warnings were ignored. The photographs freeze a moment when negligence and nature's weight combined to destroy life in an instant. The Aberfan disaster photos are not just historical records, they are testaments to human loss, grief, and the consequences of ignored warnings. They show both the fragility of life and the resilience of a community that, despite heartbreak, rallied to recover and memorialize those lost. Every image is a frozen echo of sorrow and a reminder that sometimes disaster does not strike from nature alone, but from a combination of human error, oversight, and indifference, leaving devastation that lingers for generations.
November 13th, 1985, Armero, Colombia. The Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted violently, triggering a massive mudslide that engulfed the town of Armero. Among the thousands trapped was 12-year-old Omaira Sanchez, who became the haunting symbol of the disaster. Photographs of Omagh capture a moment frozen in desperation and dignity. She sits partially submerged in water and debris, trapped by collapsing walls and mud. Her face shows fear, exhaustion, and incredible composure as rescuers work desperately around her. Makeshift ropes, debris, and mud constrain every movement, highlighting the tragic reality that nature's force had rendered even rescue nearly impossible. Rescue teams tried to save her, but the combination of mud, debris, and limited equipment made it impossible. Omagh remained trapped for over 60 hours, during which photographers and journalists documented her struggle. Despite the hope and determination of rescuers, she succumbed to exposure, infection, and exhaustion, a death witnessed by the world through the haunting images captured that day. What makes these photographs so unforgettable is the humanity at the center of disaster. Omagh was a child, innocent, vulnerable, and yet displayed extraordinary courage. Her eyes, captured in the images, tell a story of resilience and suffering that words cannot fully convey. The lahar destroyed thousands of homes, but it is Omagh's trapped figure that became the symbol of tragedy and compassion worldwide. The photos of Omagh Sanchez are more than documentation. They are a testament to human vulnerability, the unpredictability of nature, and the emotional power of photography. They force us to confront the profound reality that sometimes, even with the best efforts, disaster cannot be undone. Every image is a frozen moment of courage and sorrow, reminding the world of the lives lost and the enduring impact of natural catastrophes on individuals and communities.
April 26, 1986, Chernobyl, Ukraine. In the aftermath of the nuclear explosion at Reactor 4, a team of heroic divers descended into the flooded basement beneath the reactor to prevent a catastrophic meltdown. These men, Alexei Onanenko, Valery Bezbalov, and Boris Baranov, knew that exposure to lethal radiation could claim their lives in minutes. The last photograph of the divers shows them preparing to enter the dark, radioactive water. Their protective suits, masks, and flashlights are all that stand between them and invisible death. The image captures a moment of calm, determination, and unwavering courage. A team facing one of the deadliest environments on Earth with nothing but duty and resolve. What makes this photograph haunting is the immediacy of danger. They are about to wade into water contaminated with molten nuclear fuel, a lethal concoction that could have triggered a second explosion or instantly fatal radiation poisoning. Every detail, the tension in their shoulders, the focus in their eyes, the instruments in hand, speaks of men confronting mortality with bravery few could imagine. The heroic mission was successful. The divers opened valves that drained the water, preventing a catastrophic steam explosion that could have destroyed much of Europe. Yet the last photo immortalizes their final moment before facing near-certain death, a testament to the human capacity for courage under impossible odds. The last photo of the Chernobyl divers is more than an image. It is a symbol of selfless heroism, sacrifice, and the extraordinary bravery of ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances. It reminds us that history is shaped not only by disasters, but also by those who confront them head-on, even when survival seems impossible.
December 5, 1952. London, England. A dense, suffocating smog descended upon the city, a lethal mixture of smoke, fog, and industrial pollution. For 5 days, visibility dropped to mere feet, and the air became nearly unbreathable, turning streets into ghostly corridors of gray. Photographs from the event capture a city cloaked in thick, ominous fog. Cars emerge like phantoms, their headlights barely piercing the haze. Pedestrians stumble along empty streets, faces covered in scarves and masks, coughing, gasping, struggling to navigate through the murky air. Riverbanks, buildings, and bridges are barely visible, swallowed by the choking smog. The human toll was staggering. Over 4,000 people died immediately, with another 8,000 succumbing in the following weeks due to respiratory illnesses caused by the smog. Hospitals overflowed with patients, and emergency responders struggled to operate in near-zero visibility. The photographs show a silent city deformed by pollution, with shadows of everyday life barely discernible beneath the gray pall. What makes these images haunting is the invisible, insidious nature of the threat. Unlike a storm or flood, the smog moved silently, invisible killers riding the air, seeping into homes, workplaces, and lawns. Every photograph is a testament to human vulnerability in the face of environmental neglect. The Great Smog of London photos are more than documentation. They are warnings and lessons. They reveal how industrialization, poor urban planning, and environmental disregard can converge to create a deadly, almost apocalyptic reality in a modern city. Even decades later, these images endure as reminders that the air we breathe can become as dangerous as any battlefield, and that invisible threats can reshape a city and claim thousands of lives in the quietest, most unsuspecting ways.
December 1937, January 1938, Nanking, Nanjing, China. During the Japanese invasion, the city of Nanking became the scene of one of the most horrific atrocities of the 20th century. Over a period of weeks, Japanese forces committed mass executions, widespread rape, and looting, leaving the city in a state of unimaginable horror. Photographs from this period are haunting in their raw depiction of human suffering. Streets are littered with corpses, civilians huddled in fear, and soldiers marching through scenes of destruction. Families were torn apart, homes burned, and bodies left in open areas as the world watched in disbelief. Some images show victims lined up before execution, their faces etched in terror and resignation. Others capture the aftermath, streets and riverbanks strewn with the dead, evidence of systematic violence. The death toll is staggering. Estimates suggest over 200,000 civilians and prisoners of war were killed, and tens of thousands of women were subjected to sexual violence. The photographs document both scale and individuality, faces frozen in fear, lifeless bodies bearing the mark of brutality, and the ruined city itself, a visual testament to chaos. What makes these images haunting is their unflinching honesty. They confront the viewer with the consequences of unchecked militarism and the depths of human cruelty. Every photograph is a frozen moment of pain, loss, and terror, making it impossible to turn away or forget Nanking.
April 10th, 2019. For the first time in human history, we saw the unseeable. The astronomers released the first ever image of a black hole located in the galaxy Messier 87, 55 million light-years from Earth. The photograph shows a glowing, fiery ring of gas and dust swirling around an impossibly dark center where light itself cannot escape. That dark shadow is the event horizon, the point of no return, where gravity is so strong that nothing, not even light, can break free. For centuries, Black holes were theoretical, mathematical predictions. This image transformed theory into reality, revealing a cosmic monster in stark, haunting detail. The image is haunting and mesmerizing. The bright ring pulses like fire, evidence of matter heated to millions of degrees as it spirals into oblivion. The center is a perfect pitch-black void, a place where all known laws of physics collapse. It is both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of the universe's vast, indifferent power. What makes this photograph unforgettable is the scale and distance. The light captured took 55 million years to reach Earth, meaning we are seeing an event that happened long before humans walked the planet. It's a cosmic snapshot of destruction and creation, frozen in time and space. The first photo of a black hole is more than a scientific milestone. It is a window into the unknown, proof that humanity can peer into the darkest corners of the universe. It inspires awe, fear, and wonder, reminding us how small and fragile we are in the face of cosmic forces beyond comprehension. Every pixel of this image is a story of light, gravity, and mystery, captured by human ingenuity, showing the universe as it truly is, magnificent, terrifying, and endlessly fascinating.
1975 to 1976, Hindenburg, Germany. Anneliese Michel, a young woman of 16, began experiencing severe seizures, hallucinations, and disturbing behavior. Doctors diagnosed epilepsy and psychosis, but Anneliese and her deeply religious family believed she was possessed by demons. Photographs and stills from this period captured the chilling intensity of the exorcisms performed over 67 sessions in her family home. Anneliese appears gaunt, pale, and almost unrecognizable. Her eyes are wide with terror or pain, body contorted in unnatural positions, and the room filled with priests performing rites. Candles flicker against dark walls, casting long, trembling shadows, while religious symbols surround her in a desperate attempt to expel what her family believed were evil spirits. The case is haunting because it blurs the line between mental illness and supernatural belief. These images show a young woman trapped in both her own mind and the rituals imposed upon her. Each photograph tells a story of suffering, fear, and desperation. Family members and clergy surround her, some praying, others documenting, their faces reflecting worry, conviction, and helplessness. Tragically, Anneliese Michel died in July 1976, malnourished and weakened from the exorcisms and refusal of medical care. Her death sparked a trial, ethical debates, and inspired books and films, but the photographs remain the most disturbing evidence of her torment. The exorcism of Anneliese Michel photos are not just historical, they are haunting portraits of human belief, suffering, and tragedy. They remind us how fear, faith, and misunderstanding can converge with devastating consequences. Every image freezes a moment of extreme vulnerability, forcing viewers to confront the thin, terrifying line between reality, perception, and the supernatural, and the human lives caught in between.
November 18th, 1926, Congo, Africa. Carl Akeley, famed taxidermist, explorer, and naturalist, had spent his life bringing the wild into museums. But in the depths of the African jungle, he faced a challenge unlike any other: capturing the elusive mountain gorilla
for scientific study and preservation. The last photograph taken of Akeley shows him standing amidst dense foliage, rifle and journal at hand, face weathered from the harsh wilderness, eyes focused, and posture resolute. It is a snapshot of a man entirely consumed by his passion, on the brink of history and tragedy. He had contracted a severe case of dysentery, worsened by exhaustion and the unforgiving environment. Yet he pressed on, documenting guerrillas, sketching specimens, and immersing himself in the jungle he loved. What makes this photograph haunting is the foreknowledge of mortality. This would be Akeley's final image, taken just hours before he succumbed to illness at the age of 43. The photo captures both his
November 18, 1926, Congo, Africa. Carl Akeley, famed taxidermist, explorer, and naturalist, had spent his life bringing the wild into museums. But in the depths of the African jungle, he faced a challenge unlike any other, capturing the elusive mountain gorilla for scientific study and preservation. The last photograph taken of Akeley shows him standing amidst dense foliage, rifle and journal at hand, face weathered from the harsh wilderness, eyes focused, and posture resolute. It is a snapshot of a man entirely consumed by his passion, on the brink of history and tragedy. He had contracted a severe case of dysentery, worsened by exhaustion and the unforgiving environment. Yet he pressed on, documenting guerrillas, sketching specimens, and immersing himself in the jungle he loved. What makes this photograph haunting is the foreknowledge of mortality. This would be Akeley's final image, taken just hours before he succumbed to illness at the age of 43. The photo captures both his brilliance and vulnerability, a man who conquered the world of taxidermy, yet could not escape the raw power of nature. Akeley's death in the Congo left a void in the scientific community, but his work laid the foundation for conservation and inspired generations to respect and study wildlife. The photograph preserves the essence of a fearless explorer, a visionary who lived entirely in pursuit of understanding and preserving the natural world. The last photo of Carl Akeley is more than a memory. It is a testament to human curiosity, courage, and the thin line between adventure and peril. It reminds us that some legends are forged not only in accomplishment, but in the very landscapes where life and death intertwine.
1914 to 1918, Western Front, World War I. In the cold, wet, and unsanitary trenches of Europe, soldiers faced a silent enemy, trench foot. Prolonged exposure to damp, unsanitary conditions caused feet to swell, rot, and sometimes require amputation. Photographs from the front lines show the horrific physical toll. Soldiers sit with bandaged, swollen feet. Some display blackened toes, open sores, or gangrenous tissue. Trenches filled with mud and stagnant water serve as a grim backdrop, emphasizing the inescapable environment that caused these injuries. Medical officers treat soldiers with boiling water soaks, iodine, and field bandages, but prevention was often impossible in the freezing, waterlogged trenches. The human toll was immense. Trench foot incapacitated thousands, reducing combat effectiveness and leaving men in constant pain. Some soldiers lost their toes or even feet, forced into amputation for survival, all while enduring the threat of artillery, snipers, and gas attacks. The photographs reveal both the suffering and the resilience of men forced to endure the unimaginable conditions of war. What makes these images haunting is the intimate, unfiltered view of human suffering. Unlike dramatic battle photos, trench foot images show slow, creeping decay,
a quiet, relentless enemy that strikes without sound. Every swollen foot, every bandaged toe is a story of endurance, misery, and the daily horrors soldiers faced far from the front lines of combat. The real trench foot photos from WW1 are more than medical documentation. They are testaments to the brutal conditions of modern warfare, where survival depended not only on courage, but on water, mud, and luck. Every image is a reminder that war is fought not only with bullets and bombs, but also against the environment itself, and that the human body, exposed to neglect and nature's elements, can suffer in ways both unseen and unforgettable.
November 6, 1961, Bel Air, Los Angeles. A sudden brush fire, fueled by dry Santa Ana winds, ripped through the affluent hillside neighborhood of Bel Air, engulfing homes and landscapes in seconds. The fire moved with terrifying speed, consuming everything in its path and forcing residents to flee through smoke-choked streets. Photographs from the disaster reveal a chaotic, apocalyptic scene. Homes, once pristine, are partially collapsed or ablaze, flames licking the sky. Smoke fills the hills, obscuring the sun, while cars and emergency vehicles navigate roads littered with debris. Families are captured evacuating possessions, pets and children, faces etched with fear, urgency, and disbelief. Some images show firefighters battling the inferno, silhouetted against walls of fire, their hoses struggling against the unstoppable force of the blaze. The human and property toll was significant. Though fatalities were limited, dozens of homes were destroyed, and countless residents were displaced. Photographs show the aftermath of devastation, charred structures, smoldering debris, and a blackened landscape, with neighbors and officials surveying the ruins, grasping the scale of destruction. What makes these images haunting is the sudden, unstoppable force of fire. One moment, life continues normally. The next, it is overtaken by flames, heat, and smoke, leaving nothing but devastation. The photographs freeze that moment of terror, showing human fragility in the face of nature's unpredictable fury. The 1961 Bel Air fire photos are more than historical records. They are lessons in vulnerability, resilience, and survival. They capture both the destructive power of fire and the courage of those who faced it, documenting a moment when a beautiful neighborhood became a landscape of smoke, ash, and memory. Every image tells a story of lives interrupted, property destroyed, and the unforgiving speed of disaster, leaving an indelible mark on Los Angeles history.
August 21, 1986. Lake Nyos, Cameroon. A sudden release of carbon dioxide gas from the volcanic lake engulfed nearby villages in seconds, suffocating over 1,700 people and thousands of livestock. The gas, invisible and odorless, rolled down the slopes like a silent, lethal fog, leaving devastation in its wake. Photographs from the aftermath reveal a ghostly, abandoned landscape. Houses stand intact but empty, doors open, belongings left behind in haste. Livestock lies dead in fields, their bodies still in place, as if waiting for owners who would never return. Trees and crops, untouched by fire or flood, serve as chilling reminders that the killer was invisible, silent, and unstoppable. Rescue teams and survivors are captured in images wandering through empty villages, the horror of sudden loss etched into their faces. What makes these photographs haunting is the invisible nature of the threat. Unlike storms or earthquakes,
Lake Nyos did not destroy with debris or fire. It killed silently, indiscriminately, leaving the land eerily intact while taking life. Each photograph tells the story of sudden loss, invisible danger, and the fragility of life. They capture the haunting reality of how quickly life can vanish while the world remains unchanged around it, leaving only silence and memory.
March 11, 2011, Tohoku, Japan. A massive 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the coast triggered one of the deadliest tsunamis in history. Within minutes, a wall of water, dark, churning, unstoppable, swept across towns and cities, flattening everything in its path. Photographs from the event capture the terrifying scale of the wave. Entire neighborhoods vanish under a black, debris-filled surge. Vehicles, homes, and boats are tossed like toys. People cling to rooftops, trees, or each other, desperate to escape the relentless current. Smoke, dust, and the stormy sea merge into a surreal, almost apocalyptic scene, creating a black wave of destruction that seems alive, devouring all in its path. The human toll was catastrophic. Over 15,000 dead, thousands missing, and millions displaced. Images show survivors wading through chest-deep water, carrying children or salvaging belongings, faces etched with fear, exhaustion, and disbelief. Emergency crews are dwarfed by the vastness of the water, moving like tiny figures in the shadow of a monstrous natural force. What makes these photographs haunting is the overwhelming power and speed of nature. The black wave is both beautiful and horrifying, its darkness filled with debris, its motion unstoppable, its consequences immediate and total. Every photograph is a frozen moment of terror, loss, and human vulnerability against a force beyond comprehension. The 2011 Japanese tsunami black wave photos are more than disaster documentation. They are testaments to survival, resilience, and the fragility of civilization in the face of nature. Every photograph tells the story of a moment when life, infrastructure, and normalcy were consumed by darkness, leaving only memory, rubble, and the haunting echo of the black wave.
Everest, Nepal, Tibet. High on the slopes of Mount Everest, above 8,000 meters, lies a place climbers call Rainbow Valley, a grim monument to those who never returned. The valley is named for the brightly colored climbing gear still attached to bodies frozen in time, like unnatural flowers in the ice. Photographs from the area reveal a haunting, frozen landscape of tragedy. Climbers who perished from exhaustion, altitude sickness, or avalanches remain on the mountain, preserved by the extreme cold. Their bright jackets and oxygen tanks stand out against the stark white ice, frozen in impossible positions, hands outstretched, ropes still clutched, faces hidden behind frost-covered masks. The human toll is staggering. Hundreds of climbers have died on Everest, many near Rainbow Valley, unable to be recovered due to the perilous terrain. Each body tells a story of ambition, courage, and fatal miscalculation. Photographs show climbers' gear scattered, footprints leading nowhere, and frozen forms blending into the mountain, silent witnesses to the mountain's unrelenting power. What makes these images haunting is the combination of beauty and horror. The pristine snow and ice contrast sharply with the tragic reality of human loss. Climbers risk their lives for glory, exploration, or personal achievement, yet the mountain claimed them, leaving only bright flashes of color and frozen forms as testimony. The Rainbow Valley Bodies photos are more than chilling. They are reminders of human fragility against nature's extremes. They capture the line between triumph and tragedy, showing that even the strongest, most prepared and determined can fall victim to altitude, weather, and the unforgiving environment of the world's highest peak.
Every image is a frozen story of ambition, endurance, and mortality, reminding us that some mountains do not forgive, and that success at the summit often comes at an unimaginable cost.